So some months ago, I think it was about 6 months ago, I made a video about a lovely town called Biggleswick. Now, you may have heard of it. It's up there somewhere near the two counties here in jolly old England, near Bedfordshire and Goodham. They're the wonderful traditional old English counties that you'll be very familiar with. And Biggleswick is one of those sort of quintessential English towns. There's about 100,000 occupancies there, and they all have a lovely old time. Now, I should just say, just for those people living overseas, that this is allegory. The town is fictitious. It doesn't actually exist other than in my noggin, because when I made the video before and I talked about this wonderful town, Biggleswick, I did have a number of people from overseas ringing me saying, "Hey Richard, I'd love to get in touch with them people from Biggleswick." And I'll tell you why, because the people of Biggleswick had noticed that the council was sticking up cameras all over the place, and had started to introduce these rather large plant pots which were blocking the road. And they were saying that actually very soon you'll have limited access from one side of the town to the other side of the town. In fact, you could only go about 100 trips a year. And the people of Biggleswick were scratching their heads and sort of thinking about this and chatting in pubs and saying, well, that sounds a bit daft. What's that all about? And they went to the council and they said, hang on a minute, what's this about? I'm a van driver. I need to go across the town many times. They had mothers saying, I take my kids to creche. And of course, people needed to go to work. And the people at the council were very, very cagey. They were sort of a bit cautious about how they listened to that. And they said, well, you know, this is a new policy. It's all to do with net zero. We're saving the planet. It's being implemented everywhere. And you've got to have it. So the people of Biggleswick sort of got together and they thought to themselves, have we really got to have it? We know there's a bit of a climate thing, but is it really the catastrophic crisis they've all made out? And some of them did a bit of research and discovered actually it wasn't as bad as everybody seemed to be making out. And then they thought, well, this is a bit strange. This is our town. We pay the council tax. Maybe we should say we don't want this. So a number of them went to the council and they said, excuse me, we're really a bit unsure with all this idea. Actually, just to remind you, you are our servants and we don't want this. And the council listened very diligently and they said, oh yes, that's interesting. Thanks very much. Thanks for lodging your complaint. We're going to do it anyway. And they said, well, hang on a minute, you can't do that. And they said, well, we can, you see, because we're the council. So the people of Biggleswick went away and thought, hang on, is that right? So then one bright spark said what we should do is have a town meeting. And so a number of people started putting up flyers all over the town and advertised a town meeting for the future of Biggleswick. And people got a bit interested in that. And so they said, we'll do it in the park. Well, the council didn't like that idea, so they blocked the park and said it's closed. You can't have your meeting there. Sorry about it. So a farmer nearby said, don't worry, I've got a field, it's my land, you can come on there. So like the Pied Piper, a number of people started going to this meeting and other people saw them and said, what's this all about? Oh, it's a town meeting in the farmer's field. So they all went off. And the upshot of this meeting was that they were asking the people, and quite a lot of that 100,000 inhabitants of Biggleswick turned out, which was a tight squeeze, and they said to them, look, this is a lot of the policies the council have introduced, like a lot of the surveillance that they're doing, and even the supermarkets are putting up cameras. I don't know if you've noticed that. And the schools are requiring kids to put in their thumbprints so they can pay for their school dinner money. And of course, there's these restrictions in the roads and stuff. Don't you find that some of these policies the council have done are a bit anti-human? And a lot of people looked around and said, well, they are a bit anti-human, actually. I thought the council was there to help us thrive and have a good time and be there for our benefit rather than being penal. Well, a lot of people thought about this and they said, well, what can we do? They're the council, aren't they? And somebody said, well, they are at the moment, but why don't we have another council? Why don't we have our own council, the People's Council, you might say? And everyone started going, well, what would that do? And he said, well, we could actually do the things we want. Perhaps we wouldn't have to have all this surveillance that we're paying for in our council tax. We wouldn't have to have the plant pots. Maybe we could, be respectful to the environment, but we don't have to go to the limits that the council are pushing on us. People thought that's a great idea. So instead, they elected their own council and they diverted their money that they were paying to the council via the council tax, which wasn't even going to the council directly anyway, because it was going to the government's consolidated fund, paying for terrorism overseas and that sort of thing. So they thought, we'll just put it into a trust fund and we'll spend it on our land, basically making the council obsolete. And the council were going, hang on, you can't do that. And the people of Biggleswick said, actually we can, because there's 100,000 of us against the 20 of you. And that seemed to be a great policy. Well, that was my video 6 months ago. And I thought it would be interesting to see 6 months later what's happened to this fictional town of Biggleswick. Remember, this is allegory. And to see what's going on. And actually, a lot has gone on, because when you give the people the power, it's amazing how they manage to get on with each other and do things. And I've got a list of things I want to go through just as quickly as I can, because I don't want to hold everybody up. So the first thing they did is they decided that all this parking restrictions, they'd just do away with that. They still had the yellow lines in those places which made it sensible not to have people to park, but in the town they wanted people to come in. So they wanted to make it as free as possible for people to come in, park their cars. Obviously, don't park too long, but they made it much easier so people could come in, and some of the shops now could thrive because people weren't having to go elsewhere. They also reduced a lot of the street furniture, because there was so much of this, don't go down here, don't park here, don't stop here, this is private, mustn't go here, all this sort of stuff. They thought there's too much for the drivers to be looking about as they're driving around, and amazingly it reduced a lot of accidents. Because they now had the money in their own pot and they could vote on what was going on, they managed to get rid of all the potholes, and they negotiated with a firm, with the Highways Agency. And it's amazing, the Highways Agency was quite okay, because they could come in with a firm to resurface the roads for a lot cheaper price than the council had organised. And that seemed to be going on quite a lot. They got a lot of stuff, because they only had a limited amount, but because it was their town, they managed to get together a bunch of people, volunteers, who thought, wouldn't it be nice to spruce up the town? So they got people interested in litter picking, because litter has been strewn all over about and the council weren't really doing about it. So they decided to have a litter picking club, which involved meeting in the park, having some cups of tea, having a good old laugh, having a bit of a party, and then zipping out, picking up litter and disposing of all the nasty stuff in the town. And other people saw them doing that, and they saw them merry and jolly and thought, well, we'll get involved, do our street. So street by street, people started to take back responsibility for their area, which was rather nice. A few carpenters and people good with their hands said, I tell you what, we could do something in the play park for the kids. And so they started to knock up stuff. Instead of that horrible sort of commercialised, just one size fits all, they started to make some good stuff and got the kids involved and said, what would you like? Oh, could you do this for? Oh, yeah, we can do that. And they got really stuck in. Those people who used to use their hands in the old days and had crafts, they were really happy. And they did it for the love of it at cost, which was quite amazing. There's this awful bridge. I don't know if you've ever driven into Biggleswick, but there's this awful bridge that desperately needs painting and repair. Well, a few people said, you know, it's a bit of an eyesore, it goes over the bypass. I tell you what we'll do, we'll get a group together and we'll paint it. We'll have a good old party. And so they've made it look really nice and put Biggleswick welcomes you on that bridge, and it's really handy. And you can imagine the sort of scouring faces from the council, the ex-council, I should say. The old big oak tree that was threatened to be chopped down, that was old and dangerous apparently. Well, a few of the tree huggers out there said it's not actually as dangerous as you like, and if you manage to prop up the boughs with a few chains and a few stakes here and there, we can save it, make it into a picnic area for the kids. And so they've managed now to save that. That's not going to be chopped down, and I'm so pleased. And they've also discovered in one of the hills nearby the old Biggleswick Castle. Nobody knew about it, but the history groups got so excited. They've been running around, getting walks, looking at history and telling people about the town and how it used to be in the old days, and people are very happy about that. And so the castle has become a sort of a history pilgrimage for a lot of people, which I'm very thrilled about. Of course, they've removed all the old cameras, you know, the surveillance cameras. They got shot of that, and they persuaded the people in the shops, because it's good to have money in the local area rather than disappearing to the big corporations. They're mainly using cash now. And in fact, they've also instigated, because they were worried about these dreadful CBDCs and things coming in, that some shops are taking gold and silver, and many people are having an accounts with those family-run traders who are not big corporations. In fact, they found that some of the supermarkets now have started to get a bit worried because they told the supermarkets, you can only have your supermarket here if you don't have all that surveillance system as you go in, and make people feel intimidated. Employ security guards if you're worried about people stealing stuff, and actually do something about it, rather than surveilling people as they pick up a bag of beans or a tin of peas, that sort of thing. So a number of supermarkets are a little bit worried because head office keeps saying, where are the blooming cameras? But mostly they're investing in the independent shops. They're encouraging lots of shops to come in by getting rid of a lot of the hassle of those business rates, which were causing people a lot of problems. Because the council can do that. They say, well, actually, just pay a pittance until you get going, and then we'll worry about it. They want to support people. Of course, the council meetings are very much open to the public now, and anybody can stream in. They've enlarged the public area. They stream it to the local people. They've set up a local paper now, which is interested in what goes on locally, and people are writing their own reports, taking photographs and being photojournalists and that sort of thing. And a little radio station has come back to report on all the amazing things, which is a sort of a version between a community radio and a little bit of local music as well. Local bands and people, encouraging people to get out and get to entertain themselves. A youth society has got up. There's a youth, what do they call them now? Youth centre, because they seem to have died out. Now they're getting a lot of things for kids to do, the snooker clubs and the table tennis, the sports facilities, and letting them come in for next to nothing. It's really just all done at cost, which is quite amazing. They've got a repair shop in there, so those things that are normally thrown away, people who've got the skills to do a bit of soldering on the side are beginning to repair things. Those things like washing machines that seem to fall apart, they've managed to get new washing machines and get these sort of things repaired. The other thing they're doing, and they're very excited about this, they've reinstituted after about 40 years the Biggleswick Carnival. Oh, it's marvellous. People are coming together, the cohesiveness of society, and people are getting, and they're planning the parade through the town. All that stuff that gets people excited about their community and how things are going to be. So that's going to come up next year, and I may go there and try and report from a fictitious town. It'll be interesting. They've opened the bandstand again, and so the old brass band is out there every Saturday, and it's also encouraging a lot of street theatre and all sorts of performers coming out. So when people go shopping in the market, which has also now brought in a few of the farmers to say, why not show some of your cows, some of your sheep, some of your pigs, show people where the food comes from. And the farmers are delighted because now they've found that there's a huge interest from those 100,000 inhabitants of there to have some grass-fed beef and even raw milk, some of that good quality stuff that makes people feel really good. In Biggleswick now, I can tell you there's a hugely optimistic approach. They've started to say yes to things and work out how can we do it, rather than saying no and you can't do it. The attitude is much more. They've taken away all those anti-human policies, and they've done all sorts of things, including setting up their own peace officers instead of police officers. Obviously, the police are there for terrible crimes, but peace officers are going around taking that oath, the old constable oath, to the people and making sure that everybody is doing good things. I can tell you there are so many interesting things in my list, but I realise my time is probably disappearing. But I can tell you that Donester and Wadborough and Troutbridge, some of the neighbouring towns to Biggleswick, have been looking at them and thinking, my goodness, we want to do this as well. This is really interesting work. And the farmers have reduced the size of their fields by putting in more hedges to act as corridors for wildlife. And instead of having great big fields of monoculture, they're going into more market gardening so that they can provide some of the organic food for the local area. And people are coming back to the land and realising how important that is, and are helping in exchange for food, which is so lovely to see. Wood plantations are being planted again because they want to find a different thing for plastic. Plastic's been used for so many things, but so wood can be used for all sorts of things, and of course logs, so that people can warm their houses environmentally with logs. And of course there's that sort of rubbish about logs or not, but they take the ash from that and it goes into the garden, and the ash that goes into the atmosphere is landing on the land and providing a lot more nutrients, of course, for all the grass, for that grass-fed milk, which is rather good. As I say, people now have discovered that they've got meaning in their lives. They've got pride going on. They feel important. They feel there's a purpose in their town. The truth is, most of those people have never heard of the WEF. Most of them don't know who the WHO are, and they don't really need to. They're not aware of the depopulation of the countryside. They know that 5G is a bit dodgy, and a few people in the know have said, look, we probably don't need these towers. After all, we don't need to download videos, 2-hour videos in 6 seconds, because the pace of life in Biggleswick is a lot slower and it's a bit more mature. People are now talking to each other in the street, and the youth are beginning to talk again. They're not so much on their phones anymore, because people power, it's amazing, isn't it? People power, people love to integrate with a lot of people. And of course the health service is greatly improved now that they've got the new health clinics in which they've got herbalists and acupuncturists. There's Reiki masters doing their stuff, hypnotherapists, people, holistic farmers, holistic dentists. The GP is there with his pill popping factory, but he's not as busy as he used to be. What else have we got there? I've told you about the history groups, and the walking groups are going on. The local theatre is there, trying to sort of get people involved and being creative. You've got artists on the streets, all sorts of things like that. Pubs, very important to get people together and get together and chat about the sort of things they want. So the farmers now are growing barley, and there are local brewers, and they've said to the government, do you know what, all this tax on beer and stuff, we're not doing it. There's 100,000 people in here, we might all be rebels, but we're going to have cheap beer again. Do you remember when beer was £1 a pint? Well, we're going to get as close to that as we possibly can. We don't want a load of drunkards, because obviously we're going to be responsible, and everybody is in Biggleswick. I mean, it's an amazing town, as you can probably work out. Allotments have come about. Lots of people now interested in farming and doing organic stuff. And the fast food restaurants, it's amazing how they've chopped and changed their tunes. Many of the corporations and the brands, they've all started to sort of move out, because they've realised that highly processed food, fastly cooked in horrible sunflower oil, is not what people in Biggleswick are about. They're much more about holistic and good quality food. So it is worth looking at what your town and village could do. If only you could change the mode that you operate. You don't need to know about the nasty stuff that's going on in the world if you can induce people to think about what's going on in their world. I mean, in effect, it is a 15-minute city, but it's not by the rules of the WEF and people like that. It's like going back 150 or 200 years when people really cared about their society, their groups, their people, and they looked after one another. And it wasn't all about corporate Britain and how much money you can make. It was very much about how can we help each other and be of service. And so Biggleswick, as far as I'm concerned, is pushing back against these globalists and saying it's local, folks, local what will do it. And they're getting on doing the best they can. And I would recommend that to anybody. So thanks ever so much for listening.